done quite a few videos talking about PCR tests and how many of the PCR tests have been shown to be wholly inaccurate. Even though in America, everything is always about cases, cases, cases. But for the most part, the reason being why America is seeing so much cases, as Donald Trump has said, is because we do a lot of testing. And if you do a lot of testing with faulty PCR tests, you're just going to end up with a lot of people who end up testing positive. But of course, as we see here, judge in Portugal highlight more than debatable reliability of COVID tests. So as a result of the inaccurate COVID tests, a judge in Portugal has ruled that lockdowns are unlawful. It says, with the country assailed daily news of a rising number of case numbers, judge in Lisbon has described the reliability of tests being rolled out in their tens of thousands as more than debatable. It says, indeed, says they cite a study that suggests only 3% of positive tests declared by health authorities may be true positives. And this, of course, underscores what's going on, not just within Portugal, but what's going on, of course, across the globe. As even the FDA has talked about the inaccuracy of many of these tests, especially things like the rapid test. They're even thinking of now distributing an at-home test, right? So many of these tests are typically, you have to know how to use them, right? So even Elon Musk had said that when he had been tested most recently in the beginning of November, that he tested 4 times, same nurse, right? Same test, same technique, same machine that gives the results, and he got 4 tests, and 2 of them came back positive and 2 of them came back negative. And of course, previously, many months prior to his test as of late, he had said the exact same thing was happening back basically during the peak here in New York, back maybe around June, where he had said that about 50% of the tests were coming back false positive. Even places like Penn State University has released articles talking about the numerous high inaccuracies that they've had with the PCR test. So you have a lot of people, of course, that think that, I see them here. There's a lot of these places here in Manhattan that basically say free testing. It's not really free testing. These are tests that are basically paid for via your taxes, right? And so these companies that are basically making money off of these tests, and the vast majority of these tests are not accurate. It's why so many people have not had symptoms, even though they say, they come back and they say, oh, people that they did antibody tests on, and they said overwhelmingly a lot of these people who they checked to see if they had antibodies that didn't have antibodies, it's because they weren't infected in the first place to begin with. That's why they had no antibodies. And so the judge here in Portugal goes on to say that if you can't lock down people based off of false tests, so they've ruled it unlawful for them to do that anymore. Now, of course, that is completely different from what is going on in places like in the UK, where the UK has recently locked down, very stringent lockdowns. But what is happening in the UK, as it goes on to say here, Brits who test negative for COVID-19 could get, in essence, a freedom pass to avoid restrictions. So for the most part, most people have to wear a mask. You have to socially distance. They can't open certain businesses, as you've seen going across multiple nations, not just alone here in the United States, but in places like Canada and other countries. And of course, can you imagine, this is like old school, what they were trying to do back in the days in Texas, where they were trying to get the police officers to walk up to anybody who looked like they were an illegal and be like, show me your papers, right? And so, of course, the Supreme Court had ruled that was unlawful. But you best believe that if they're trying to do this in the UK, they're more than likely going to try to bring it here. Why do I say that? Right? Airlines discussing requiring proof of COVID vaccination for passengers. So what we're seeing is places, for example, like in Australia, where they're basically trying to force people to take the vaccine. A vaccine that has been rushed and has not tested the long-term ramifications for a virus that has a 99, well over 99% survival rate for many individuals who basically are testing positive for a disease utilizing faulty tests. And of course, this is all to push out a faulty a vaccine for people to take. Now, again, maybe they might not be able to try to, in essence, force people and hold you down and make you take it. But if you plan on, do you think that the airline workers would be able to refuse? If you can't travel because you have to have a COVID vaccine, right? And this has been shown both within the state and to do international flights where they would require you to have a vaccine for you to travel. Do you think that the employees would be able to say no to the vaccine? The other thing is, many people are wondering, with many of the lockdowns, it almost feels like they're trying to destroy small businesses. Now, of course, in America, small businesses make up the overwhelming majority of job creation, right? So small businesses make up roughly 99.7% of the U.S. employer. This is 64% of the new net private sector jobs, 49.2% of private sector employment, 42.9% of private sector payroll. So an overwhelming number of the jobs that are here says 98% of firms exporting goods and 33%, right? So a lot of the jobs here, a lot of the job creation, a lot of the wealth is created via small businesses. And what we've seen is many of these small businesses, despite any sort of data, there's no data that says that small businesses spread the virus any more than big businesses do. And yet we'll see a lot of these small mom and pop stores that are basically being forced to shut down, while a lot of the big companies, like for example Costco, Walmart, etc., are being allowed to remain open. And people may be wondering, well, why is that? And I would imagine that if your goal is to force people into subjection and you're trying to get people to take a vaccine, then it's much easier to wipe out many of the smaller businesses and then force many of these people who are now searching for jobs to either become dependent upon the government or seek a job in one of the more larger companies that are allowed to stay open. And then basically, in essence, you do become forced to take the vaccine, because then you wouldn't be able to work. Or the government could say, well, if you're not going to take the vaccine, then you can't leave your home, you can't, go food shopping, etc. Things of that nature, right? They will restrict your ability to move. I mean, we're already seeing people being arrested just for opening their businesses, people who are defying their local state governments, and the police will show up en masse to arrest you just for you trying to remain open and do business. Like I said before, if people don't band together and stand up to the government against what's going on, you're just going to get more of this. The more of it you put up with, the more of it the government will dish out.